Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. Appreciate you taking a few moments. If you will, like, share, comment on the post, and then you can join me in the book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 24, and we'll begin in verse 15. We'll go down through verse 25. As he's praying, before he's finished speaking here in verse 15, as he's praying, a young lady comes to the well and comes to draw water, name of Rebecca. We learn, again, as you read, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with her water jar on her shoulder. She ends up being what would be the grand niece. I'm not good with all, I'm an only child. I'm not good with all those family things like first and second and third cousins. She was the grand niece of Abraham, and she would have been the granddaughter of Nahor, it says here, who was Abraham's brother. She is beautiful. She was still a young lady, young, beautiful lady. She comes out, and we know, because we've already read the story, I think, that Rebecca is God's choice. And so Rebecca gives the servant water, and then of her own choice decides to give water to the camels, which is quite the impressive undertaking. Again, we've already talked about this. Camels can drink as much as 30 gallons of water, and notice she only did it, but when we get down here in this passage, it said what she did quickly. She was tough. She was strong. She was a real prize. Good looking. She was a real prize. A servant. He stands off and he watches Rebecca, keeps an eye on her, see what she's going to do to make sure that she is the right woman, that she gives water to all the camels, and she does exactly what he had asked God to have her to do, to lead her to do. So she completely passes the test, I guess you'd say, meets the measurement. She is God's choice for Isaac's wife. And then he gives some gifts to her and asks about her family. She still has really that one test to pass. He asks her who her family is, and so she finds out who she is, and that she is indeed part of Abraham's clan, as it is described here, or the assignment that Abraham had given him. And a couple of things I want to point out in this story is the servant, how he acts here. I think we could talk a lot about Rebecca and her attractive appearance and her willingness to water the camels and doing it quickly. But I want to talk about this unknown servant. This servant, notice what he does. He follows through on his prayer. He didn't pray and then give no more thought to that prayer. He remembered. He knew what he had asked God. He prayed and immediately began expecting, I believe, an answer to that prayer. He immediately began expecting God to do something, to intervene, and to step in and to bring this woman to him. He was going to find her. And then he strikes up the conversation. He takes the initiative. He doesn't just sit back and wait for God to throw her in his lap. And I think there's a lot we can learn there about the issue, the practice of prayer. That this man, I believe, expected an answer. He believed God was going to answer his prayer, and he was watching for God to answer his prayer. Some of you who are, well, I'm not going to say his name just because I don't have permission, but we used to have a gentleman. We have in our church a prayer ministry where people call in their prayer request, and then it's passed on. It's called a prayer chain, where people then, those requests are then passed on, and people to pray. And I didn't know when this gentleman took over that he was doing this. It was only later when he called me to follow up on one of the requests that had been called in that I discovered that he was, when someone would call in a prayer request, he was writing it in the book. And then when he found out how God answered that prayer, he'd go back and write the answer beside of that request and keep up with it. And again, I found that out as we were talking one day about something, and he began to talk about a situation. He said, I keep up with all of them. I love to see, it's amazing to see how God works these things out. He said, there have been requests that came in that I thought were practically hopeless, and God has worked them out. I don't know that nothing wrong if you want to do that. I'm not telling you you should do that. I don't know. Everybody's different. But I do believe we should watch for God to answer. Do we, what I think about is how many of us can remember what we prayed for yesterday, or maybe even last night, or whenever you're watching this? Maybe it would be a good idea to keep a little more careful record of what we have asked God for, and then a record of how he responded, what he did, so that we could, our faith could grow as we see the response of God. Just something to think about. You may want to look into, get you a little cheap notebook, and keep up with your prayer life, but more importantly, how God answers. You think about it. Have a great day. We'll see you here tomorrow morning.